Vocals are the focal point in almost every song. Getting them to sound controlled and consistent is a crucial component to any great sounding mix. But you can often run into issues like overcompressing a vocal track when you're trying to tame the dynamic range to get things to sit right in the mix. So instead of running through a standard vocal mixing chain that you'll find in most videos, I thought it would be a better idea to demonstrate some lesser talked about techniques that will give you this control without the negatives you would encounter from typical vocal compression. Let's start off with a quick comparison of the technique I'm going to be covering in this video so you can hear just how effective this can be at controlling your vocal sound.
Burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I...
The essence of most songs lies in its vocals. They connect the listener deeply to the music, shaping the overall experience. That's why having vocals at the forefront of your mix often makes the most amount of sense to tie in with this idea. So any amount of added control you can achieve pre-mix is going to make your job much easier once you go to mix the vocals properly. A basic vocal chain might consist of EQ, compression, maybe some form of saturation, and then some limiting for that final bit of added control. Now, while there's nothing wrong with this setup in theory, the problem you can easily run into, especially if you're dealing with a track from an inexperienced vocalist, is that the dynamic range can vary massively from line to line, or even word to word. And running this through a compressor may not give you back that controlled sound you're looking for because it's having to react to such drastic fluctuations in level. This is what really hinders the ability of a compressor to do its job properly. So the best way around this is to use what's commonly referred to as clip gain to prepare our vocal track in a much more consistent manner so that when we do feed it through a compressor, it's reacting to a more uniform signal. This stops the compressor from overreacting to the incoming signal and actually allows you to push things harder without the fear of overcompressing it. A good way of demonstrating this is by listening to these two vocal tracks. They're both using the exact same compression settings as you can see here, but vocal 1 has been compressed without using the clip gain method and vocal 2 has been compressed using the clip gain method. I'll play these two for you first and then discuss what's happening.
Throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I...
So as you probably just heard, some of the words in vocal 1 still jump out quite a bit, even after the compression. And you can audibly hear the compressor working harder during those moments to try and tame the louder peaks of the vocal signal. Whereas in vocal 2, the whole take sounds smoother and the compression is a lot more transparent in sound. It sounds controlled but not compressed, if you know what I mean. And that's really the main benefit of this technique. You're setting your compressor up for a much easier task, which in turn gives you back a much more consistent result. So let's talk about why you'd use the clip gain function in the first place, and why it's better than simply feeding your compressor the unprocessed signal or using automation. The great thing about clip gain is where it falls in the processing signal chain of your DAW. Typically, everything flows from the top down to the bottom in most DAWs, so you'd start with a gain function at the very top, which then moves down to the FX slots, to the sends, and then finally your channel fader. And each part of that signal chain will affect the one before it. So if I boost a load of low end on my EQ, this will affect the way my compressor reacts because it's second in the chain, meaning it's now having to respond to this boost in the low end of my audio signal. If I placed the EQ after my compressor and then applied this boost, it would no longer react any differently to this EQ move because this change is now happening after the compression, not before. Clip gain is the perfect tool to use in our case because it happens right at the very start of the signal chain. It's the first thing that you'd want to do before EQing or compressing the vocal. It's better to use clip gain over automation too, as automation falls at the very end of the signal chain. So if you were to automate these changes in volume first, instead of using clip gain, you wouldn't actually have any effect on the compressor, and it would still be registering the inconsistent vocal level as before. Automating a vocal would be a great way of controlling it even more, though you'd want to do this post-clip gain and post-compression for the best results. But before we move on, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, check out the Sage Audio membership. As a member, I have to say it's an incredible experience. Just for signing up, you receive 50 free mastered songs per year with your own dedicated mastering engineer, direct one-on-one mentorship that's tailored towards your specific mixing needs, unlimited mixing feedback to help improve your mixes, and access to Sage Audio University for in-depth mixing and mastering courses. But more on that at the end of the video. So let's take a vocal example and I'll walk you through the simple process of the clip gain technique. You won't need any special plugins for this, all you'll need is a cutting or razor tool in your DAW. If you want to get an extremely consistent sound, you could also use some type of loudness meter to measure out each section so that every part of your vocal roughly peaks around the same volume. Though I prefer to do this by ear for the most part. For this vocal section, I'll zoom in closely and you can see visually in the waveform where the louder and quieter sections are. But you'll also notice that when I play the clip, some parts that look quieter, like the breaths, tend to jump out too. So don't rely entirely on what you see, as breaths and sibilant sounds can often look quite deceiving compared to how your ear will hear them.
Burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause
I'll loop this smaller section and then play strategic cuts in between each word, attenuating or boosting based on what I hear. You can drag this horizontal bar up or down to control the gain of each clip, or in my DAW I can hold shift and use this level control at the top of my sequencer for a more fine-tuned approach. Each DAW will work slightly different from one another, so just make sure the thing that you're adjusting is the clip gain parameter when you're doing this technique. You're really looking to create a smoother vocal sound, so you want to try and get the level of each word as consistent as possible from one word to the next. Of course, keep in mind the context of your music. For example, this vocal is going to be in a dense rock track, and having less dynamics from the get-go will allow me to create a more upfront, in-your-face vocal sound by the end of it. But if you're working on something that relies heavily on the vocal dynamic, you may want to be more subtle with your moves. So now that I've gone through this small section, I'll A/B this with the original, so you can hear how even these small moves are already making this vocal sound a lot tighter dynamically, before we've even added any compression.
burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause
Another great thing about this technique is that you can effectively use it in place of processors like a debrief or de-esser. Or at least you can do a similar thing like with compression and stop these plugins from overreacting to the more dynamic parts of your vocal signal. Normally, when I get to a spot with an S sound, I'll often turn this down much lower than I would with the rest of the words. So for most of the cuts, I'm only attenuating by -0.5 to -1 decibels, whereas with the S sound, it's coming down by -4 decibels. You can often get away with more aggressive levels of attenuation as sibilant sounds have a lot more emphasis on the upper frequencies. As you can see here, this looped S sound has a lot of energy around the 9 kHz area, which will sound very harsh to the human ear. And once you send this through a compressor, it's only going to make this sound even more noticeable. So dealing with this problem first, using clip gain, is going to give you a much smoother vocal sound as a result. Breaths in between the lines are also another thing to watch out for. It tends to be down to the artist or mixer's discretion as to how many, if any, breaths are left in the final vocal mix. So in this instance, I'm going to leave them in because I think they add a lot of character to the vocal, although I'm going to treat them in a similar way to the previous S sound and take this down by around -4 dB so it doesn't then get emphasized by the compression I'll be adding later on. It's worth noting that you'll often want to use micro crossfades when doing this technique too, which, if you're unfamiliar, are just very small fades in between each word to avoid any pops or clicks in the audio. Most DAWs will have some type of automatic function or command prompt for this, though you can go in and manually add these yourself if you're noticing any weird noises being introduced after you've made your cuts. So now that you've got a much more controlled vocal sound from the clip gain function alone, you can then run this through a compressor to really glue the entire vocal sound together. I often like compressing my vocals in stages, so at this current stage I'll opt for a smooth, mostly transparent sounding compressor, something like an LA2A or in this case, the Magic Defi compressor. I'm not using this compressor as my final vocal sound, this is more here just to hold everything together that little bit more. Once I place this vocal in a mix, I'll have a better idea of the compression I'll likely need, so I'll probably opt for something more aggressive like an 1176 to really get that upfront vocal sound. But by clip gaining and then lightly compressing the vocal before all of this, it's really going to make the job of my final compressor that much easier, putting less strain on it as a whole. So let's listen to an A/B of the original vocal with compression versus the clipped gain vocal with the exact same compression settings.
Burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I burn my throat and race my heart. I didn't know that this would start, 'cause I...
As I mentioned earlier, if you want to get your mixes to sound like professional songs, check out the Sage Audio membership. As a member, I have to say it's an incredible experience. Just for signing up, you receive 50 free mastered songs per year with your own dedicated mastering engineer, direct one-on-one mentorship that's tailored towards your specific needs, unlimited mixing feedback to help improve your mixes, and access to Sage Audio University for in-depth mixing and mastering courses. Your dedicated mastering engineer will learn your sound and craft masters specific to your preferences, and you'll also get unlimited revisions to ensure every master sounds exactly how you want. The one-on-one mentorship gives you personalized mixing guidance tailored towards your specific needs. Get all your questions answered with fast communication and receive unlimited advanced mixing feedback and suggestions for improvement. Coupled with the one-on-one mentorship, you also get access to Sage Audio University, where you'll find our in-depth mixing and mastering courses, walkthrough sessions for multiple genres, multi-track project files for hands-on practice, and a Sage Audio certification document for completing the courses. Additionally, you'll be able to enter their mixing and mastering competitions to win prizes while growing your skills alongside a tight-knit group of audio engineers. Inside the membership, you'll have access to the Sage Audio community, which is full of passionate producers and engineers ready to have meaningful discussions, network, and collaborate. The membership also includes over 70 gigabytes of downloadable content, including mixing and mastering chains, multi-tracks for mixing practice, recommended free plugins, recommended paid plugins, and plugin presets. Furthermore, you'll get direct access to their full catalogue of 700 plus in-depth mixing and mastering videos specifically created to help you improve every aspect of your mixes. Every day, I see great wins in the membership from producers and engineers noticing a massive improvement in their mixes after joining. Use the link in the description today to join the Sage Audio membership with a 70% discount and start creating mixes that sound like professional songs.